faux pas, and they're looking for a viral moment. That's what they'll be looking for tonight.
No handshake.
Duh.
And there you have Governor Walz appears to be taking some notes. J.D. Vance doing the same as our colleagues.
And they were shaking hands before the cameras came.
That's right. Okay. Well, we have the vice presidential debate coming up in a moment. It will be moderated by our own Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz take the stage. Well, they've taken the stage, so stick with us here and join us also on our streaming channel, CBS News 24/7, for exclusive content you won't see anywhere else. Thank you for joining us.
There we go.
Tonight, with just over a month to go until Election Day, the first and only meeting between the two men who hope to become vice president of the United States. Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota.
Ready to have some fun?
Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
No.
At the end of this little journey, Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
Yeah.
CBS News Special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Norah O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz.
Aren't you just the patriot?
Senator J.D. Vance, tonight, meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic
On the brink?
Hurricane Helene.
What are you talking about?
25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Norah. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you. And thank you for those joining at home.
It better be yes.
Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. I think it was 1,200. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it
Wait,
experience today,
what proxies does
along with
Israel
our,
have?
Israeli partners and our coalition able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago. A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment.
Okay.
But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both
answer the
of
question.
his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's
I
unfit
hate when
for
they
the
do this.
highest office. That was Senator
Like,
Vance.
just answer the question.
Out of Vice President Harris.
Should Israel strike and prevent
We've seen a calmness
Iran from getting a nuclear weapon?
coalitions to bring them together.
Or not.
Understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today is, we will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the
I
same
take that as a
question.
yes.
Would you support
A very long,
preemptive
too long
strike
yes.
by Israel
Yes,
on
I would
Iran?
say
You have
that's
2
it.
minutes.
Long.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this
Also
country
answer the
to pay
fucking
attention to this
question.
vice presidential debate.
everyone's
I want
right.
to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a
Oh,
little bit because I recognize a lot of
no!
Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working class family.
You're the
My
dude
mother
that wears the
was
eyeliner. Like,
years
what's
ago,
to
my
know?
grandmother required Social Security help to raise
Wow.
me, and she raised me in part because my own
Wow,
mother struggled
that's
with
a-
addiction for a big
that's a
chunk
boss
of my early
move,
life.
though.
I went to
Oh,
college
go
on the
and
GI
answer your own
Bill after I
question
enlisted in the
and
Marine
pretend like
Corps
you're
and
so
served in
gracious about
Iraq.
it,
And so
too.
I
That's
stand
good.
here
Thank
asking to be
you.
your vice
That's
president with extraordinary gratitude for this country,
Sir,
for the
as
American
much.
dream that made it possible for me to
Mr.
live my
Asman.
dreams. And most importantly,
Point-
I know that a lot of you are
mean,
worried about the chaos.
Literally not saying anything.
No,
about
no,
you.
but he's
unattainable.
using the platform.
I want to try to
for
convince you
that
tonight
game,
over the next
right?
90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House.
I mean, to be
America
fair,
will be
it is a
one
simple
again.
yes or no
Now, to
question.
answer
It really
this particular
should be,
question,
but,
we have to remember
But
that
to
as
be
much
fair,
as
they
Governor
also
Walz
knew they
just
weren't gonna
accused
get
Donald
any
Trump of
yes or
being
no.
an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by
he
establishing
didn't.
effective deterrence.
Oh, shut
People
up.
No,
who
he
are afraid
definitely
of
did
Donald
not.
Oh, God. he did
Iran,
not.
which launched
He
this
did
attack, has
not.
received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala
Also
Harris
not true.
administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're
Oh,
now
Tim's
launching
not
against
happy.
our allies,
Oh, come on,
and God
Coach
forbid,
Tim.
potentially
Tap into the
launching
coach.
against the United States
Find
as
the
well.
coach.
Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They
No
needed to
one
recognize
fear.
that if they got out of line, the United
Got
States
out of
global
line?
leadership would put stability and peace back in the world.
I don't know
Now, you
about
asked
that.
about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the
Like
Israel question.
Ukraine?
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump
Here's a much better.
who we had a coalition of nations
He's not
that had
starting off,
boxed
he didn't.
Iran's
Shut up.
nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program
See?
and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were
There you
before
go.
because of
There you
Donald
go.
Trump's fickle leadership. And when
Yeah.
Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace,
Ooh.
Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies
The
understand.
fact check on what
Donald Trump is fickle. He will go
Vance
to
had said
whoever has the most
is
flattering vote
that
where it makes sense to
there were actually
steady
two separate
leadership like you witnessed
deals
today, like
in
you
place,
witnessed in April.
one
Both
under
Iranian
Trump, one
attacks were
under
repelled. Our
Biden.
coalition is strong.
Uh,
and we need
the one under
steady
Trump
leadership
freed
that
up
Kamala Harris has
$10 billion
provided.
Senator
of
Vance,
unfrozen
the US did have
assets,
a diplomatic
and the one
deal
that
with Iran
Biden
to
did
temporarily pause
freed up
parts of its nuclear
$6
program,
billion
and President
for a
Trump
total of
did exit that
$16
deal.
billion, not
He
even
recently
close to
said,
$100 billion.
just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make
But
a
they
diplomatic
did use
deal
it,
with Iran
obviously,
because the
for
consequences
weapons.
are impossible.
And it was in
If you
exchange
make a mistake,
for
you
a
have 1
prisoner
minute.
swap.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk
He
about
removed us out of that deal that would have prevented it.
that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran
Where's my
and
buzzer?
their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength.
I need
is
one
how
of
you
those,
bring stability back
what
to a
line it
very
is, whose
workable
line
world.
is it anyway,
Donald Trump has
buzzers?
already done it once before. Ask yourself at home. When was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot
Thank
to
God, because he would have just capitulated
Let's turn now
or
to
done
Hurricane
something incredibly
Helene.
stupid,
The
like
storm could become
drop
one of the
that
deadliest
when he
on
dropped
record.
that
More than
MAOB.
160 people are dead, and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger,
Mother of all
and
bombs.
more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit.
Nobody likes him.
Trump as president again, the government will
At
put
all.
the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed.
So that's why you're planning on gutting the EPA.
Right.
This idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true.
Weird. Climate science is not weird science.
The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris?
No, we're not. Not even close.
In China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Where do we go?
Denmark?
You have 2 minutes.
Most
environmentally friendly according to agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane, and my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors, as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors, no partisanship. They work together to solve the governors.
I'm using Copilot. I'm cheating.
Those happen on the front end.
We rank
The
34.
federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover, but we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax, and then joked that these things would make more.
Even of the major economies,
what we
the United Kingdom, France, and Germany
administration now, the
rank
Biden
way
Harris
before
administration
us.
is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here.
He just tagged him in his own fucking state.
Largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wheat. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical.
Like if you want the U.S. to be energy independent, you're required to
all across the country.
You go to renewables.
Administration is done.
Like that's the only way you can truly do that.
Superpower for the future, not just the current, and that's what absolutely makes
Until
sense.
you do, you're going to be dependent on China, on the Middle East.
Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said, I think is
his energy policies make no sense.
Talk about clean energy. I think that's
won't tell me
that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the
I know, remember?
And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels,
there's a good damn reason for
that. Make the economy dirtier. We should be making more.
I don't know if you've ever been in a hurricane.
Some of them are.
But I imagine a fire hurricane would be infinitely
especially
worse.
the components that go into this hurricane. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look.
Shut the fuck up, Senator.
Gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our #1 export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota.
Good one. I like
that is a good
how we
one.
respond to that. We're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters.
What is it, immigration?
Your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally, and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil. You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do?
Most
20, 25 million.
fentanyl and its precursor equipment such as pills, pill presses used to make the drug often enter the U.S. through common trade pathways such as air cargo and express courier, not across the U.S.
folks. And then I think that make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers.
This is from
if they can't work
the CPB
in our own country.
Or
and by the way,
CBP.
that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans,
if anything, that is exactly why you need to increase the number of border people.
We're going to go back to
and not put a wall there.
She would do that. It would be good for all of us.
And yes,
Governor,
Governor's going
do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history. 30% decrease in Ohio, but there's still
thanks to Cheryl Parker.
Let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve
what did you do with your law degree, boy?
Want to solve this. And
Didn't he have a law
is
degree?
the
I think
United
he does
States
have a law
Congress.
degree.
That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen.
And your party killed it.
Senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford, I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime.
And half of that was just repairing the old wall.
He came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children even if their kids are U.S. citizens.
Oh, he never even actually answered the question.
We already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country, and we know that they use children.
No, she don't.
It is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that.
Because they suck.
A record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did.
We have to ban the donkeys and the mules.
94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border.
All non-horse
problems in the United States.
Equestrian
Schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary, but the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement?
54% of Americans.
First of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement.
Yeah, I'm looking at the poll now.
Our borders are Kamala Harris has been.
Scripps Ipsos.
Because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job.
All Americans, including 25% of Democrats.
And the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable.
So getting people to or call in bomb threats is the answer to that.
The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace. I agree with you. I think you want to solve
fire tornado.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us, you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want
hit him with the Bible.
And that's a good one. That's
It's funded.
nice one.
It's
I would
supported.
I
never
have no
argue with
idea what
that.
that one is, but
It's a good
About
one.
how we treat other people.
It's just your old
Thank
do
you,
unto
Governor.
others.
And just to clarify,
okay, right on.
Springfield, Ohio
Jesus,
does have
do
a
unto others.
large
We're
number
down
of
with it.
Haitian migrants. who
Migrants
have
are
legal status.
33%
And
less
it's- and it's-
likely
Well,
And it's
Mar-
very
Mar-
popular.
Thank you, Senator. We have
to be
so much to get
incarcerated
to.
than people in the United States.
We're going to turn now to the economy. Thank you.
They're 47% less likely to be convicted of crime
I think it's
than
important
native-born
to see what's
Americans.
actually going
Immigrants
on.
are 47%
So there's an application
less
called the
likely.
CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border
What's
warrant.
wrong with CBP?
That is not a person
That is
coming
like
with
one of the
a green
most,
card and waiting for
like,
10 years.
When did
That is
you
the
say that?
facilitation of illegal
People are gonna be
immigration,
shocked
Margaret,
that there's a
by
Thank you,
our own
Senator, for
leadership.
describing the legal
And
process.
Kamala
We
and
have
Kamala
so much
Harris
to get
opened up
to,
that
Senator.
pathway.
Those
We have
laws
so
have been on
much.
the books since 1990.
Is that what
Thank
he's
you,
talking
gentlemen.
about? Is he
The
mad
CBP
that you
one
sign
app
up
has
for
not been on the
asylum
books.
online?
well, yeah, but I think he was also, like, the law
Gentlemen,
or
you-
the thing he was
The audience
quoting
can't hear you because
was
your mics are
actually
cut. We have
the-
so much
the-
we want
the
to
work
get to.
permit
Thank you for explaining the
immigration.
legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret.
They cut the mics.
The economy
Oh,
is
they
a
cut
top
the
concern for
mic.
voters. Each of your
up,
campaigns
damn
has
it.
released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics.
Yeah.
Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit.
Okay.
The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you.
Tax
And
They also
Kamala
said
Harris and I
tax
do
the rich.
believe
You
in
should
the
also
middle class
mention
because
that
that's
they-
where we
the same
come from.
organization
We both
said
grew
that
up in
her
that. We
policies
understand.
are
So those of you out there
better
listening
than
tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen.
Ew.
You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by 1/3. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000.
Yes.
Now, this is a
All business.
philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, he said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption
Hitting them
or
with the
sales
left
tax
and the right
on
right
everything
now.
we bring in.
What?
Everyone agrees.
He's
including
hitting them with the
businesses,
left and the right,
is.
hitting them on the amount of
lead to a
that his
recession.
administration
Look, this is simple for
balloon.
you. Where are we going?
$8
Kamala
trillion.
Harris do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their
1.7.
Yeah,
$8 trillion.
get 'em.
Our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a
Fuck
moment
you,
to respond on
Senator.
that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan
Oh, here we
and
go.
says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Oh, those
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just
Those
heard it in
working
the answer,
guys.
a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years.
she
had the
hasn't.
opportunity to enact all of these great policies.
Oh
No,
my God,
she hasn't.
you
Instead,
idiot.
It's been a
Idiot.
Republican-controlled Congress for like
25%.
2
And a
years.
vice
The cost of
president,
housing
that's like-
higher by about 60%.
You do nothing as vice
Open the
president
American
except
I know,
civil
right?
rights and make
You break
middle
You,
class
you
Broke
sit there
the
and
good
look
ties.
pretty
Broke
and
the
go
good
around
ties.
and look
Kamala
pretty.
Harris has such great plans for how to address middle class problems, then she ought
Mike
to
Pence
do
was
them
merely a
now.
houseplant
What
the
happened
entire
for
time.
President and the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that
until they tried to hang him,
about how much you can trust
until they tried to hang him.
Plans.
Until they
now,
tried
Donald
to
Trump's
kill him,
economic plan is not
took him
just
like
a
4
plan,
years
but it's
before he's
also
like,
a
"I don't
record.
think I can
A lot
support
of
that
those same
guy."
economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policy,
because you have common sense, Mister, out of can order
generation in this country, 1.5
without being weird.
Lying. He's just lying.
Peace and security all
you're
over
Donald
the world.
Trump.
So
You're
when
going to
people
take
say that
home more
Donald
money
Trump's
in your
economic
paycheck
plan
than
doesn't
ever
make
in the
sense,
world ever.
I say look
No,
at the
they didn't. Mike, I did not.
for
No.
American workers. Now, Tim
I do now.
admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald
because
Trump's
it
tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle class.
No, it didn't.
It was
Ever.
passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one. Whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year?
Yeah, right.
And Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years. The last year as president. That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. And I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop.
Well, the part that we do have too many drugs that we need
Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
If you're listening tonight,
because they're morons and they have no idea what they're talking about.
I think most people watch Fox News.
Look,
a lot of them.
I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that. Look. We produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China.
Yep.
So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver
he
lower
tailgated on
simultaneously got to
Obama's
Harris's atrocious economic record, which
and
has
then
made
fucked it up at the end.
Housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989.
Are you a red?
But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life. I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you,
Every
Governor.
time
Senator Vance,
Republicans come to power,
you called your running mate,
the
Donald
economy
Trump,
goes
unfit
into
for the
recession
nation's
or
highest office, and you said
depression.
he could be America's Hitler.
And this is based on the data since 1970.
You regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020.
And now you're fucking saying it was great?
His economic populism. So you're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret,
like everybody else.
And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong.
No, you weren't. You were right the first
some
time.
of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay.
No, he did not.
An economy that works for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think
delivered us a near depression.
When you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think
calling him a Nazi was misspeaking.
I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you
I don't misspeak and call people Nazis. I call Nazis Nazis.
Consistent. That I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration in the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States senator.
You had a Republican Congress.
Debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of
and
things.
you were part of that Congress.
For example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and
it is
surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing
that's what a tariff is, dipshit.
Some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs, and it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this: if you're trying to employ slave laborers,
the only time a tariff works is if it's something that we use here and we can produce here.
Our country stands up for itself.
Like steel or something.
Not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no?
What a dumb fuck.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas...
And a lot of these medical decisions need to happen right then and there.
She went home.
That can't afford to wait.
And now she may have difficulty having children.
I haven't even thought about
or
it, but
in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific.
Yeah.
When got asked about that, Senator Vance said two wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world.
And we were already one of the highest in the world.
The World First in healthcare for a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal,
particularly in black and brown, with black and brown?
Certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And you know, I grew up in a working class family.
That's the most.
I believe in God. I believe you have domain over your body.
A lot of Americans don't agree with most of the things I ever said on this
we didn't have any
topic.
other options. And, you know, I one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching.
An understatement.
And I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship.
What?
And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do.
Did he just say that he knew a woman who had an abortion because she was in an abusive relationship?
I want us to
and
make
his response is that we have to earn your trust back on this issue?
To afford a home so they can afford a
But
place.
you've never had the American people's trust on this issue because of dumb shit like that.
Just to give women
you know your
more
running mate
options.
doesn't agree with you on
Now,
that?
of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different
No
viewpoint.
shit, Sherlock.
And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense.
This is why we can't have nice things.
A very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
No, because
Yeah,
that's
well,
in the Constitution.
the question got asked, and
Constitution
Donald
never said a
Trump
woman has a
made
right
the
to
accusation
already
it wasn't
say-
true about
But it
Minnesota.
It did
never
suggest,
said
though,
a
that it has a right
people
to
in black
privacy,
people say-
though. It did suggest that it had a right to privacy, which is
She
what
happened to be in
Roe v.
I
Wade
agree
was
with that,
based
but
on.
that's not what they're how they're
Because of
reading
that,
it.
she had to travel a
Well, they're
long
fucking
distance
morons.
I
So
know, it's
Carolina
horrible.
to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died
Yeah, she did.
in that journey
women in
back and forth.
there's that.
The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber
there's a word for that.
she would be alive today.
There's a word for that.
That's
It's called
why
slavery,
the
I think.
restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice
Yeah,
President
the
Harris
slavery
talk
thing
about
was
this
very
subject,
much
and you hear
about
me talk about it,
It was.
you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the
Yeah, and
problem.
that's a
Governor, your
problem.
time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban.
Yeah, you
I
did.
did during when I was running for Senate in 2022.
did.
Talk
You
about
did-
setting some
that-
minimum
Yeah, you
national
did.
standards.
I
For
said you
example,
didn't, and then you said you did.
in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I
Yeah,
hope not.
you
So I know that
are.
Democrats are taking
are.
a very radical
Yeah, you
pro-abortion
are.
stance. But Nora, you know, one of
Liar,
the things that
pants on
changed
fire.
is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum
Greg.
in 2023, and the people of
You
Ohio
also had a
voted
10-year-old girl
by
that
the
had to
way,
go to another
against
state.
My position.
Okay, sorry,
And
I'm
I think that what
back.
I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would
That was
love to
Ohio,
have
right?
families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing
Okay, so what?
pro-family policies, making
So
child
what?
care more
Bragging
accessible,
about how
making
you
fertility
overturned Roe v.
treatments more
Wade is
accessible,
your
because
start?
we've got to do a better job at
That's
that.
a really
And that's
bad
what real
opening.
leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro freedoms for women to make their choices. And we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit. But we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris is supporting Catholic nuns.
There you are. Sorry, I got knocked off.
We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their health care decisions.
And we're back.
Physicians who know best when they need to do this.
I have no idea.
The way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor?
I
thought it was the other hat.
Look,
but how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things work best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals. They get early childhood education. They get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
Okay. So what shall we do? Pause it? Pause there?
I don't know.
Your screen sharing is paused.
Well, you can just mute it.
I will.
Just mute it.
There we go. Are we no longer sharing screen? It says our screen sharing is paused.
No, it says
it's still there, but it's paused.
Ah, fascinating.
Huh.
I wonder if it stopped there.
I wonder if it just automatically starts up again. I don't know.
Why would it automatically start up again?
Well, it says you got a resume share button right there.
Yes. Then that's how it doesn't automatically, but it just will. And then we can watch this, and when we're ready, resume share. So what do you think so far, Corey?
I think it's, they're both doing okay. I mean, obviously, Vance is lying through his teeth on every fucking issue and taking some of the most horrid positions, while also admitting that both he's lying and taking the most horrible positions. But at the same time, I think that the Republicans will make an argument that he did fine. If not,
oh yeah. Well, they were trying to set the bar.
They have a much better argument there than they did with Trump. And
yes,
Absolutely. They were trying to set the bar low to begin. Like they always do.
Well, Vance has an advantage in that he, for the last many years, has been a talking head on TV, on news programs and all that shit. So he knows how to do it.
But here's the thing: he set the bar so high for himself, that he's still going to come away looking like he actually lost, because the bar was also set very low for Tim Walz.
Oh, interesting.
They said, look, he's not good at this. Ahead of time,
Interesting.
And I think he's doing quite fine. I mean, he's not really scoring points.
He's very nervous, and then first
yes, it's clear that he's very nervous. And that guyliner guy is, kind of in his element.
But you see him and he speaks a little weird. Like there's pauses that ordinarily aren't in speech, and I'm like, is he gonna say the right word? What's going on? But he does. But then when he gets like when he does a rebuttal, I think he's much better. Like because he's like, oh, I'm talking to you, and he's so much better at communicating that way than he is than just answering a generic question.
It's called being from the Midwest.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what he just needs? He needs to be talking to somebody.
I mean, you have to think of it like the Midwest. Like, where's he from again? I don't even remember.
Nebraska, I believe, a small town in Nebraska, like 300 people.
I didn't even know there were more than 1,000 people in Nebraska until recently.
Right. What's the biggest city in Nebraska?
I have no clue.
I have no clue.
What's their capital?
I have no clue.
I also have no clue.
Hey, what's the main?
I don't know anything about Nebraska.
I would say, what's the main?
Snow.
What is their main economy? What is it?
Snow.
No, economy. What is it? Corn? Is it wheat? Is it
probably
cattle?
something? I had to turn off my
Let me look.
my Google machine.
Well, let me look. What would it be? Top economy of Nebraska. It's obviously not tourism. Come to Nebraska, I guess. There's something. There's wheat. What is in top experts, top economy.
Yeah, I gotta say, I like that Walls is
their capital is Lincoln.
Lincoln, that's right.
Ah, I know that. That was good.
Yeah, I gotta say, I like that Walls is trying to find some common ground. He's like, I agree with that. I agree with that. You know, like, and what's
cattle, corn, soybeans,
and what's his name is trying to do it too.
Oh, they're back.
Kind of, yeah.
Oh shit.
Weirdos are back.
Okay, we're back, everybody. Resume.
It's resumed.
Did you already?
Yeah. It's muted. It's muted.
Legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
But
on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be
fucking
different
non-answer.
Hands over a gun, knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is
Jesus
now in
Christ,
second
he
grade.
reproduced.
And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces.
His eyes red.
And we know, unfortunately,
I just noticed
a lot of
that.
kids are
Is he getting
experiencing
his eye
gun
makeup in his
violence.
eyes?
Of course, our hearts go out to the families that
I
are
think
affected by
they
this
say
terrible
that
stuff.
it's
And we
actually
do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border,
close the loophole.
Massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartel. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
With the assault
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare.
U.S. guns and ammunition flow south is a well-documented problem, not the other way around.
Don't leave you. As a member of
We're
Congress,
their problem, not them our
in my
problem.
office, surrounded by dozens of
This is
Sandy Hook
facts.
parents. And they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead. And they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced.
In 2023, the Border Patrol intercepted over 1,000 guns heading into
We've got
Mexico.
folks that won't allow
Not out of
research to
Mexico.
be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not
I do
fair
like
enough.
that.
He is giving him way too much credit.
I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this
calibers
issue.
were
She
going
knows
down
that it's
there?
No one's
Holy
trying to
shit.
scaremonger
What are you
and say
trying
we're
to
taking your
kill?
guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills.
Yeah, right?
They're being kids. We owe it to them
We
to
can
get
do
a
it.
fix.
It's
These are things that
stupid.
shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a
Just
difference.
how
We
about not
have to.
the
If you're listening
AK-47? How about
tonight,
not
this
military
breaks your heart.
Don't go squirrel hunting.
Tim,
with
first
an
of all, I
AK.
didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you
okay.
saying that.
Christ have
Oh,
mercy.
yes,
It is
Tim did it.
awful.
The magic
And
of
I
Tim.
appreciate what Tim said actually about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay.
Talk about
First of all,
herring.
we have
Let's talk
way
about
higher
some
rates
herring.
of mental health abuse or mental health.
I wonder why.
We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety.
Yeah.
We
I
unfortunately
wonder
have
why.
a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's
Yeah,
the
but
whole reason
try
why we
giving
have
money
such
to
a
that
bad gun
much.
violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it.
I work
Another
almost 7 days
driver
a
of
week.
the gun
Danny works
violence
6
epidemic,
days a week.
especially that
Right?
affecting our kids.
Right?
It
And why are
doesn't
you
earn
giving
as
all the
many
money to the
headlines,
cops
but
that
is
are
the
just gonna
terrible
shoot
gun
shit
violence
and not
problem
giving it to
in a lot of our
counselors
big
that you
cities.
say you need?
And this is why
After
we
that
have to
one day
empower
of
law
cops
enforcement
The one
to
day, the
arrest the bad
purge,
guys,
after
put
a
them away,
purge, will
and
be
take gun
fine, right,
offenders
Corey,
off
as
the
an
street.
Yeah,
expert
that's
on
what he
justice?
said. He said
Just
we
one
an
day.
hour of,
Look at
or
our
was
schools.
it a
We've
day
gotta
or an
talk
hour
about
of
more
One
violence?
day, 1
Senator,
hour,
thank
but
you.
really
Governor,
a
you
day.
previously
It
opposed an
has
assault
never been
weapons
tried
ban, but
before.
if only
There's
later
never
in your
been.
You
political
only
career
crack so
did you
many
change
heads.
your
It's
position.
called a
Why?
program.
Setting that off with those San Diego parents. I've become
Oh my
friends
God.
with school shooters. I've seen it.
And
Look,
they
the
work
NRA, I
so
was an
well.
NRA guy for a long time. They used to
That's
teach
why
gun
there's no
safety.
crime in the world.
I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is talking about cities and where it's at.
He lost the pheasant
number
vote
one
right now. I can
where
tell
the
you that.
most firearm deaths happen in
Totally
Minnesota are
lost the
rural
pheasant
suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves.
Whatever
And
sound
so
they make. I
we
don't-
have, and we should look at all of the issues,
I think they do that.
making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue,
Doesn't mean
I
you
never
should-
trust people who
Yeah,
go pheasant
no.
what we
hunting.
end up doing is we
Most
start
of them
looking for a
aren't.
scapegoat.
Most of them
Yeah.
shoot your friends in the
you.
face.
It's just the guns, and there are
Ah,
things that you
just
can do about it.
effing
But I do
guns.
think that this is
F's
one,
sake.
and I think this is a healthy conversation.
It is.
I think there's a capacity to
Go,
find
Tim,
solutions
go,
on this
Tim,
that
go,
work,
Tim.
Calm down.
protect Second
Calm it out,
Amendment,
guys.
protect our children. That's our priority.
The wall's
Gentlemen, thank you,
magic.
Margaret.
Thank you,
That's
Nora.
great. That's great.
Let's
answer.
turn
Good
now to the
answer.
It was
top
a good answer.
contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing
He's gonna
and
make,
rent.
he's gonna make Vance's.
There's a
he's gonna make
shortage of
Vance's
more than
eyeliner
4 million
fine.
homes in the United
Like,
States,
who wants to
and
tickle?
that
Who wants
contributes
to
to the
tickle?
high housing
Tickle months is
crisis.
coming.
Governor
Vance is
Walz,
like,
the Harris campaign promises a
That's all
$25,000
you
down
do.
payment
Tickle
assistance
money.
for first-time home buyers
took him to
and a
Minnesota Fair.
$10,000 tax
buy
credit.
corn
They
dogs.
also
He would be a
promise
Republican.
to build
Eat.
3 million new homes.
Gentle nuggets.
Where
I
you
think they
build
need to
these
give
homes
this
and won't handing out that
make
kind
this
of money to
retroactive.
Yeah.
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up.
Yeah, and
it can
that's
be shipped,
Yeah,
it
that
can be
wonderful
moved
program
around.
we talked
Those
about.
are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as
You're
I
Catholic.
said,
Is that what you guys
program
do?
that the vice president
You're
is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance, I can tell some of you out there,
able to keep her trailer.
certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in. And we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough.
He's looking over there like
affordable housing.
Sure
that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration.
Seize federal lands? What are you talking about?
I know, right? We're all going to be living in the national
all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris.
They have nothing to do with it.
Which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country.
The driver of increase in home value or home prices is fucking corporations buying up neighborhoods
under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration.
We're doing more drilling than like at any other point.
And the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build a house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still
Weren't
have
these the same people that told us that it was
where,
wrong and immoral to
Governor, we will get
release
to you in a
the
moment.
reserve?
Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing.
They are.
We think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in.
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national park and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities.
By move, do you mean like
make
5
money,
feet
let's take this
over?
federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants and that
you need to be like
your time is up, but Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify there are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
No, it's not.
What are the
it's
federal
real
regulations?
case.
I deal with this as a governor.
It's allowing real
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry.
Fuck him.
I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen.
Good for you. Good one.
We have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, I have concepts of a plan. Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing.
It's going to take longer than 2 minutes. It took him, what, 8 years?
I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized.
Yeah, because they couldn't get it anymore.
It's very simple common sense.
And they didn't get private health insurance.
You're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually
That's a long-winded way to say no.
That's a way no, yeah.
Prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%.
Yeah,
he introduced pricing transparency. You think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think
it's not a plan.
A good argument that it's salvaged.
That's pawning it off
disastrously until Donald Trump came along. I think it's an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with every everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that
No, he couldn't have.
it's not perfect.
You guys couldn't fucking pass anything.
Donald Trump has
Democrats saved it.
put in place
over
and earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley.
Neither would I.
3M,
Right.
Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you.
It's critical.
Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs, and the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Take a shitty ass job.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality,
because he tried to do them.
Inflation was low, take-home pay was higher, and he
No,
saved
inflation wasn't low. There wasn't anything to buy.
Collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment
What problem did he
go
solve?
up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what
So you
happens
think the
is
individual mandate's a good idea?
you shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some cases, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national?
That was a slap in the face. That was a low-key slap in the face.
How long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who's an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump.
Well, at least he'd want some choice somewhere.
If you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is unacceptable. And you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot.
You know how you fix this problem?
Biggest complaints I have from young families is
like it being a caregiver at home,
like they're choosing
paid job,
going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Here's the thing,
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said
Fucked up.
As much as childcare is talked about as being expensive,
Why can't
it's
you pay the
relatively
mother to take care
speaking
of her kid?
not very expensive
cost
compared to the
What
kinds
the
of numbers
fuck?
we've been taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000
Should
per
be
child
committed.
tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal.
Sure, that's why you gave one to billionaires and said you were going to give one to billionaires again.
We're going to be able to provide paid family
Because
leave.
the average American worker is a billionaire. You know?
For a lot of American families.
Manufacturing back. Jesus.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Throat punch him, please.
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Maybe just like speaking.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals.
Not an option.
Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell
And
you.
if we can vote everybody out.
This is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread
It's hot in my office.
The governors of every
I don't know
state
why, but it is.
Republicans and Democrats certified
but my
the 2020
back door
election
ain't
results
open, so.
and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th.
Like a little
Senator
Vern
Vance,
Shirley
you
one.
have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have
No,
asked the
it's
states to
awful.
submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal.
Yeah.
Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even
I
if
can.
every governor
Okay, I'll do it.
certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable.
You're not focused on the future. Trump has been talking about the 2020 election for the
the
past 4 fucking years.
Trump said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate
there
those
weren't.
issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's
Public
all that
square?
Donald Trump
Where
has
is
said.
the
Remember,
public
he
No,
said that
facts
on
are
January the
facts.
6th,
Where we all
protesting
have
And
debate our
peacefully.
bread every
peacefully.
morning.
And on January the 20th, what happened?
The good old
Joe Biden
public
became the
tweet.
president. Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration.
Yeah, whatever.
I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country. Unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans,
I'm not doing it over politics. I just don't want to be friends with assholes.
I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue.
Tulsi Gabbard
Gabbard
was never
united behind
really a Democrat. She was always a
principle that we ought to debate our differences.
And everybody knew it.
About them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters.
He's talking about there being consequences for disinformation.
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there, they were chanting, hang Mike Pence.
Who the fuck does that,
Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January 20th for 250 years in this country. We're
They didn't have a choice. They were going to drag it out.
I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers. He'll have my best wishes.
You didn't have a choice but to go.
Whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for
you literally stopped having any presidential authority.
Hillary Clinton,
the moment Biden takes the
election stolen by Vladimir
Putin
because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Give a look.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I
fucking asshole.
Don't understand.
No, it wasn't. It was Donald Trump saying, be there in D.C. It'll be wild.
And all of us say there's no place.
And then pushing the Stop the Steal narrative
This idea
like
that there's
before
censorship
even
people from doing
the election happened.
someone
The
threatening to do
piece
something.
was
That's
so
not, that's not
inflammatory.
censorship.
I was
Censorship is
working
book
on. I
banning.
sometimes have
We've seen that.
like
We've seen
news
that brought
going
up.
when I'm working
I just
on like
think for
graphic arts because
everyone tonight, and
I'm
I'm
listening
going
to it with one ear, and
thank
I'm
Senator
like,
Vance. I think this is the
telling people
conversation
to
they
go,
want to
like,
hear.
storm the
And I think there's a
Capitol,
lot of
and
agreement.
then
This is one that we are
as you know,
miles apart on.
like
This was a threat
he
to
was
our
clearly he
democracy
was
in a
telling
way that
people
we
to
had
storm
not
the
seen.
Capitol that
And it
day.
manifested
Yeah.
itself because
There's
of Donald
no way
Trump's
he
inability
wasn't.
to
Like,
say.
I know you
He
can
is
pick
still
his words
saying
apart, be
he
like,
didn't
well,
lose
he
the
didn't
election.
say
I would just ask that. Did he lose the
doing
2020
that.
election?
Tim,
It
I'm focused on the
sounded like it. I
future.
was
Did
being
Kamala
paid
Oh, he
Harris
just asked him
censor
if he lost the
Americans from
2020
speaking their
election. Focus
mind
on
in the wake
Right.
of the 2020
Wow.
COVID situation?
That is
Has
a
she
damning.
tried to-
That is a damning non-answer.
Has she? It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship.
Oh.
Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the
threatening or
power
hate
of
speech.
government and big tech to silence people from speaking
There
their mind.
isn't.
That is a threat to democracy that will
No,
long outlive this present political
I
moment.
can't
would like
scream
Democrats and
fire in a
Republicans to both
theater.
reject censorship.
thank
Let's
you.
persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
I told you.
Theater, you guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't
Senator
wear
Governor
masks.
does
That's
have the
not
floor.
Sorry.
No,
fire in a
that's
crowded
Zuckerberg.
theater.
That's
That
not the
is
government.
criticizing the
government.
policies of the
That's not
government,
Zuckerberg. That's
which is the
private
right of every
Zuckerberg.
American.
That's
Senator
Private
Governor does have the
fucking
floor for 1
social
minute to
media.
respond to you.
Yeah.
What are you
Well,
talking about?
I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now
Also,
again,
Facebook is a private business. That is not a
We lost
First
the
Amendment
election.
That's
issue.
amazing.
This is not a debate. It's not. It's not anything anywhere
amazing.
other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look,
It's amazing.
when Mike Pence
That's amazing.
made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage.
That's amazing.
What I'm concerned about is
amazing.
where is the firewall with Donald Trump?
Wow.
Where is the firewall
Holy
if
shit.
he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So, America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and
Certainly
who's
do.
going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up.
Wow.
Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News Vice Presidential
It's still going. I
Debate
thought 2:30
continues.
they were done.
Are we done? All right, we're gonna
Can you guys extend this? Because this is clearly still going.
still going. Let's turn the sound down. What do you think?
It got a lot better in the second.
Oh my
quarter.
God. Tim was just like,
He's still very nervous, and I get it.
yeah,
You know, but he's gotten a lot. He's actually gotten shots in.
he has. That last one was really amazing. I was
called that one.
You did. You were like one. You did it twice in a row. Then you were like you were like blah blah blah, and then he said it. Then you're like blah blah blah, and then he said it. So it was awesome. It was so awesome. I'm enjoying
Great old men think alike.
old men. Are you enjoying it? Is this working for you?
I am certainly enjoying it. Gotta pee like a racehorse, but
Do you? Are you drinking?
no, because I gotta work later.
Boo.
I gotta work later, so
Well, that's good. I'm glad you are. We dropped the paper.
maybe,
Yeah, huh?
maybe. I don't
Oh.
know. Gotta double check.
This is fun. So Steve and I are trying to like economize our paper stuff. And we found that we were looking at some of the stuff you've done in the past, and there's some really good stuff that's still really valid and deserves
Yeah.
another rerun. Like your breakdown of the prison system and all that stuff. That was really good stuff, and it's all still
More valid.
exactly more relevant. Exactly, it was prescient in its day, so it's nice to throw that back out there. So I was just enjoying that.
Right on.
Yeah, man. Thank you. So every once in a while, I get extra grateful for you. And today was one of those days where I was looking it up, going like, "Damn, I'm loving this." And you had a really hilarious one after the election that was supposed to be a red wave, and it wasn't.
Oh yeah, that was great.
You were so sarcastic and funny. It was really good. I hope we can write that again.
Hope I can get time. I have to put together a presentation before the 10th because I'm doing another podcast that celebrates like photojournalists and their careers, like who have had like a national, presence. And I'm doing that, and it's on the 10th, and I still haven't even started the
Oh no! What are you gonna do it on?
I don't know. I'm gonna kind of picking some of my greatest hits, I guess.
Awesome. That's fun. Well, I hope there's some greatest hits from our craziness. So you've got.
I'm sure. I think there probably will be.
There's some good videos. There's been some funny stuff.
Photos.
Oh, photos. Sorry. Yeah, photos are good. It should include video though.
Well, I mean, it should, but like I don't do videos, so like.
Well, yeah, you do. You do now.
Well, I do this, but
video.
Technically, but
I'm just saying.
Does voting matter?
What?
WHYY, does voting
matter? WHYY.
Oh, fuck yeah, it does.
It does. We just need to fix it a little bit.
I feel like it was like that one where I posted where it's Lorenzo, and it was like your vote doesn't matter, and it worked out how it didn't matter, but then it was like actually it does because XYZ. So it ended on
they're back. Yeah.
All right, we're gonna go back to Sharon.
I'm gonna step away for a sec.
Okay. Is that how it works?
Is that right? Screen.
What is it?
This one?
This one.
Why just
I don't know. It was supposed to be
well,
it's supposed to just resume.
No.
I don't know.
Go share screen.
Okay.
That guy. And then share.
And then,
all right. And it's
muted
on the other screen. Yeah, you gotta unmute it.
From Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or your exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said,
this is closing arguments, I think.
Yeah.
First inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that.
I remind people that he killed or was responsible for the deaths of over 1 million Americans.
Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate.
Ironically.
Yeah, right? How about that?
Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly
took that straight from Reagan.
For Kamala
Harris. It feels like it.
Governor Walz, thank you.
No, those were his literal words.
Was it?
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people. For
the end part about a new day.
One of the issues we didn't talk about was
I think it might have been a new dawn.
And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets
You
pretty
told
cold
me
at night,
extra hard.
and because money was
Got
often very
sweaty.
tight.
Did you have
And
a
I
grandmother
believe
when they
as the
hatched
person
you
who
out of the
wants to be your
test
next
tube?
vice president,
Yep.
that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe
Nope.
whether you're rich
That-
or poor,
nope,
you ought to
nope.
be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder
Red
because of Kamala
Lobster.
Harris's
Wait, I
policies.
closed?
I
Okay,
believe that whether you're rich or
no.
poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought
I'm
to
sorry,
not
but
have your
who
kids
had
flooded
empty
with fentanyl.
grocery shelves?
And that
I
too
know,
has
right?
gotten harder with Kamala because of Kamala Harris's
Wasn't
They're
Kamala
fighting over
Harris?
toilet
Now, I've been in
paper.
politics
What?
long
Wait,
enough
who
to do what
couldn't
Kamala
get
Harris
toilet
does
paper?
when she stands
Right?
before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on
You're
all
gonna be a
these challenges
dictator.
I
No,
just
wait,
listed.
that's my guy.
She's been the
Uh,
vice president for
On
3
your guy
Day
says
one was
day one he's going to be a
1,400 days
dictator.
ago, and her policies
So
I'd
have made
rather
these
have
problems
Kamala.
worse.
I'd rather have
Now, I
not the
believe
dictator.
that we have
Whatever
the
that
most
they're
beautiful
doing,
country in the
not
world.
the
I meet
dictator.
people on the
Put me up for
campaign
that.
trail who can't afford food, but
on
have
day
the
one he's going to
grace
be a
and
dick,
generosity
is
to
what
ask me
he's
how
going to
I'm
be.
doing and to
Ask
tell
me
me they're
how
praying
I'm
for my
doing.
family. What
Don't
that
ever
has taught
ask
me
the
is
vice
that we have
president
the
how.
greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people
Most
anywhere in the
fuckable
world.
country. Look at
But
those
they're not
Rockies.
going to
I
be
mean,
able to achieve
Isn't
their
his,
All right?
party the one
dreams with the
constantly
broken
saying
leadership that we have
how
in Washington.
America's
They're
basically
not
on
going to be able to
fire?
live their American
Yeah,
dream if we
we're a
do the
third world
same
country.
thing that we've been doing
Yeah.
for the last 3.5
But
years.
I don't think he's
We
checked
need
in with his running
change.
mate.
We need a new
I
direction.
don't think he
and we
has
need a
either.
president who has
Yeah.
already done
Does
this
he
once
know who
before
he's
and
running
did it
with?
well. Please
done it
vote for
once
Donald
before.
Trump.
It
And
went
whether you
so
vote for
well.
me
Remember
or vote for Tim
pandemic,
Walz, I
toilet
just want to say
paper,
I'm so proud to be doing this,
all
and
that
I'm
shit.
rooting for you. God bless you
Horse
and good night.
paste.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election
very
cycle.
similar.
I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election
Together,
Day.
we're Nora
Please
O'Brien.
get out and vote.
Together,
And for
we're
all of
Nora
us here at
O'Brien.
CBS News, thank
Not
you
us.
and good night.
Margaret was trying so hard to smile in that. That was like the fakest smile
Right,
ever.
so what do we think?
I think at the end of this, I think that Tim did what he needed to do.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think we'll find out like
Yeah.
in the next couple of hours, maybe who won,
Right.
What
the feedback is.
Yeah. I'd love to, run upstairs and go listen to the spin room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I think I mean Walls didn't do the smackdown like
Kamala did. No. He had a couple of good
he was
a couple really good
he was
jabs.
positive and he did
Yes.
what he did Tim. And I love again that he reached across, he's like, we agree on some things. And he heard actually Vance sort of echo that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was meaning to do that, but anyway, I thought it was refreshing to hear guys talk about, okay, well, there's some middle ground, even though Vance probably in a lot of those cases is bullshitting.
Absolutely. He was bullshit. Like he didn't believe any of the fucking things he said. Not even all the really crazy things either. That's the sad part.
Right.
He's so vapid and just hollow that he'll say whatever he has to say in the moment.
Yeah.
To talk to whoever he's talking to.
He does
And
seem
one
like
of his
that, yeah.
least human qualities.
Agree.
Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't seem to have a center.
No.
No.
Or a soul.
That too. He does have some smoky eyes, though.
He does have alluringly smoky eyes. We do
They were
love
red.
that.
They were red as shit. It
Isn't
looked
that
like he
a
had just smoked some weed or something.
If
I
he,
hope so.
I often, I wonder if he's not just a plant. Maybe this is a big hoax.
He's a Democrat plant.
He's a Democrat, he's always been, and he's just I'm gonna play this as far as I can
I'm
play
gonna
it.
suck up to
Wouldn't that be
him.
great?
He's really easy to do that too. I'm just gonna suck up to this.
Except that
guy.
he's not. I mean, he was saying some pretty vapid shit
He was.
before. Not.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously he didn't really get glob onto the whole MAGA bullshit
Yeah.
until very, very recently. but he wasn't that far from it either.
No, yeah.
And like certainly I think he did vote in favor of not certifying the election.
Yeah. Or he would have, yeah.
No, he would have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
like you guys pointed out, he took an awful long way to say no.
Yeah, right.
Response, yeah.
That was the most annoying, and it's the most annoying thing with every politician. Like some questions are just fucking yes or no.
Yeah,
I agree.
Like I thought I was wondering what would happen on the Tiananmen Square question, where obviously Tim exaggerated. If he just said, you know what, I sometimes get ahead of myself. I exaggerate a little bit on that one.
Why not?
Like, would that destroy you? I don't know. I mean,
I don't think so. I mean, it shouldn't compare compared to all the
Compared to
lies
all
that
the
Trump
lies that
says.
a person could tell.
Like if that's
went
the
a little
worst you
overboard.
got,
yeah.
If that's the worst you got, I mean, come on.
Seriously, right?
Yeah.
Right? And I mean, he was there within months of it.
Right.
I'm sure the vibe in the area was
Well,
very.
that's what I was going to say. You could have been like,
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
Like I don't
I
think it was just you had to be there at that time with the guy who was with the tank
Yeah.
and shit. Like I think
yeah,
it
I
was
was so in with the people. I felt that
right.
spirit. That
I
was
got it. I was
side.
there during that time.
Right. I sort of had an
So,
osmosis.
yeah, I can totally get that it's
Yeah.
not because I mean I could say like, oh yeah, I was here for the Super Bowl, even though I really wasn't, but I was kind of.
Yeah, I was outside.
Right,
the fans. I ran.
I was there with the fans, and so it's the parade. It's not the same as being at the Super Bowl, but in your head.
Yeah.
Anyways, I thought it was a pretty good debate. I mean, certainly way better than the fucking previous two presidential debates.
Yeah, better.
Although
way
I enjoyed Kamala smacking the shit out of him.
Yes, that was fun. That was fun.
That was awesome.
That was the best one, but this was the second, and it wasn't even a close second because it was kind of boring. I would say it wasn't that great.
But you know what? Big debates should be a little boring.
I agree.
I mean, in theory, like but I'm a nerd, so.
Right, but that's why Trump is so popular, right? Because people who don't normally nerd out on politics are still like, hey, I want to watch this because he's so bizarre and unpredictable and weird that.
Yeah, but I don't want to watch somebody who's going to give me nightmares.
I know, but we all do. I don't know.
And
I do because I have to.
Yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, I want politicians to be boring again.
I know.
I want them to
I'm resentful.
Just fade into the background. You're not supposed to be like, again, it's
I'm
like,
sick of this.
what is it? It's it's show business for ugly people.
It is. That's
Like,
what
just
politics is, showbiz
fade
for ugly
back
people.
into the background, for fuck's sake.
Please, we're
Just do your job.
right.
Talk about your record.
That's
Do your
it.
job.
That's it. Every couple of while, pop up and be like, remind me why I voted for you in the first place. And if I don't get it, I'll go with the other guy. But otherwise, just fade into existence. I don't need to know what your opinions are on trans. I don't care what your opinions are on gay people. None of that shit. Women, no. Just shut up.
And that's the thing. That's
by the way, I heard today that yesterday. Was it yesterday I sent you that?
I don't what? My Facebook is all fucked up.
On Instagram.
Okay, well, Facebook. Well, I get it through Meta, so I'm only on Facebook. I'm hardly.
Apparently, there is a conspiracy theory out there.
Oh, I love it.
That Jews are responsible for trans people.
Corey, what have you done?
We're turning people trans.
Corey, why? Why are you doing this?
Oh my God.
Why?
I have no idea.
And why haven't you told us or written about it? What's going on here? I can't believe it. Like,
but I don't remember why.
So believable.
Right? It's on the level of space lasers. I'm still waiting for mine.
I'm so sorry.
I'm also still waiting for my Soros check.
I know.
For all of the hard work that I've done.
He supports everything you do.
Oh
my God, that's so funny. That's so funny.
It's just amazing. Just fucking amazing.
Well, I can't.
The things that people believe about Jews.
Oh my God. You're responsible for trans people.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. I see it. Like,
and we're responsible for World War III.
Abraham, Moses, trans people. Well, I got it. Makes sense. And World War III. which hasn't happened yet, but it will, and it's going to be your fault. Duh.
Yeah,
Of course.
Of course. Have you seen?
My fault specifically, no lie.
Yeah, and not just Jewish. It's specific.
This
to
Jew's
that
fault.
one.
It is this
right
Jew's
there.
fault.
That one. On that note. Just send your comments.
I thought we were supposed to blame Canada for.
I love that song, but no, sorry. Only the Jewish parts.
Oh, jeez.
Sorry. Sorry, you do it well though. You're a great target. We appreciate that about you. You just absorb it from all angles. It's amazing.
I do these days. We all do these days.
Oh, that's amazing. Anywho. All right. Well, this was exciting. I'm glad we could do this and have fun working tonight. And I can feel the excitement.
Sounds excited, yes.
Yeah, right.